Begin with what is now the aftermath of the largest single-state ICE raid in American history. Nearly 700 undocumented people, mostly from the reports we're getting as this is a developing story, mostly Latino, detained after these raids at 7 different food processing plants in Mississippi. Hundreds today have not all been released from custody, but there are these now devastating reports of how it works, of how this goes down when the government does this. Children effectively abandoned because their parents were swept up. The Jackson Free Press reporting it as thus, quote, "Children finished their first day of school with no parents to go home to tonight. Babies and toddlers remained at daycare with no guardian to pick them up. A child vainly searching a workplace parking lot for missing parents." Here's another report.
Fighting back tears, 11-year-old Magdalena Gomez Gregorio expressed to us her devastation being alone without her dad.
Governments, please put your heart. Let my parents be free.
Children left behind and families impacted by each raid stress their parents and friends are good people.
I need my dad for me. My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal.
He said that his mom is gone, that he's upset with Trump. He said he just wants his mom back. And they're both crying. They've been crying about all day since they got home from school.
If that's hard to watch, hard to take in, especially on a week like this, but on any day, that is just a couple of the stories that we've been sifting through. That's just a few of the people who, in the parlance of journalism, happen to go on camera. The wider impacts and devastation that we're dealing with, when you think about what we're reporting, the largest single-state ICE raid, we're still just getting these stories in the local reporters and the local print journalists. So that's part of what the Trump administration is doing right now, while Donald Trump also visits the grieving communities of Dayton and El Paso, with officials saying that the timing here is, according to the administration sources, a coincidence. Now, the purpose of these visits were also, according to the administration, to try to offer comfort. Hundreds protesting that El Paso visit. The Washington Post reporting that none of the 8 victims being treated in the Texas hospital that Trump visited would actually agree to see him. Their call. And on a day intended, again, where the White House said this was about unity, with a community reeling from a gunman who was purposely targeting Latinos, the president went on to complain about immigrants, quote, pouring into the nation, attacked political rivals, and then this, a local El Paso TV station obtaining video showing in the middle of Donald Trump's hospital visit, he ended up taking time, and mind you, he has his day, we know he tweeted on the plane, he has the whole time. What you're about to see is him in that exact time period. He took a moment to brag about the size of the crowd he had the last time he was in town.
I was here 3 months ago. We made a speech, and we had what was the name of the arena? That place was packed, right? There was some crowd.
Thank you.
And we had twice the number outside. And then you had this crazy Beto. Beto had like 400 people in a parking lot. They said his crowd was wonderful.
You could decide for yourself what you think of that and what you think of seeing the president checking a box for going into the hospital room for the visit and what that connotes, what that is supposed to mean regardless of party, and what he actually just did there basically by himself, which was try to make a comparison politically to a former member of Congress. That's the backdrop for the intensity of the back and forth here as this very sad week for America continues. Democrats calling out the president, punching back, sharpening their attacks on what they say was Donald Trump's mishandling of this week's crisis.
You've been very clear that you believe the president is a racist. Is the president a white supremacist?
He is. He's also made that very clear. He's dehumanized or sought to dehumanize those who do not look like or pray like the majority here in this country.
Why was it important for you to come out yesterday and say unequivocally that you think the president is a white supremacist?
So, I was asked the question and I gave an honest answer. He can't keep trying to stir this up, give aid and comfort, be embraced by the white supremacists, and then say, oh, but not me. No, he's responsible. He's the president of the United States.
I'm joined by Danielle Moody Mills, host of SiriusXM Radio's Woke AF, Maria Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of the group Voto Latino, and Eleanor Clift, a Washington correspondent for the Daily Beast. Thanks to each of you for joining me. I want to start with something slightly different. which is not to ask a question which frames this. But starting with Eleanor, given what we just saw, which was a lot, what are we supposed to do from here? What's on your mind? What do you think people should be doing with all of this?
What's on my mind is the treatment of those migrants or undocumented workers in Mississippi was just gratuitously cruel. The way they were rounded up, and apparently there was some complicity with the plant owners. They basically turned over these people who they probably knowingly knew did not have the proper documentation. These are people who were doing the hardest and the lowliest of work. They're picking apart chicken parts in a processing plant, the job very few people are willing to do or want to do. They're hardworking, they're law-abiding, and to pull them away, and as you said in your introductory remarks, you know, leaving children waiting in daycare centers and so forth. Almost half of them have been released. They'll have future court dates. But this is, you know, this is not about the rule of law, as the Republican governor in that state said. This is a political strategy to keep ramping up the grievances that a segment of the American population feels, and directing those grievances at a scapegoat, which is undocumented immigrants, primarily Hispanics. And if we're in for this for 15 months, I want to believe it won't work, but it really terrifies me. It pits one America against another America. And the America that Donald Trump is perpetrating, because of a quirk in the Electoral College, the states that he is really most active in, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, really, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, he seems to think that he can squeeze out every white aggrieved vote and pull off the same inside straight that he did in 2016. I think that's what this is about. It's political. I don't even think the president has deeply held ideological beliefs. I think he's just doing what he thinks will work to get him reelected.
Danielle, you're nodding.
I just, in this moment, I woke up this morning and I saw that video of the little girl crying. And as a former early childhood educator, all I could think about was how are the schools preparing these young kids, mental health services that this administration has cut? The idea that we are literally setting these children up for generation of mental health issues, right? Deep trauma that we are purposefully putting and placing on these children for no reason. If we really cared about an immigration system and trying to find a way for people to come to this country legally, why aren't we rounding up the owners of the factories that are knowingly hiring cheap labor? Why aren't they the ones that are being prosecuted? Why aren't they the ones that are being held accountable? Because if there weren't jobs that they were opening up, much like Trump did at Mar-a-Lago and his other facilities around this country and around the world, then you would stave off part of the desire for people to want to come here.
Well,
we never hold them accountable. We never hold the owners accountable.
Because Maria is such an expert on both these immigration rules and also how they're being enforced now, I'll take Danielle's question to you and bring it back to us. What's the answer to that?
Absolutely. I think the biggest challenge, and this is where I would say the Democrats have actually missed the boat, is that the people that are complicit in making sure that these individuals have jobs are the companies, and the companies oftentimes will actually call in the ICE raiders right before they have to do a paycheck to ensure that they don't have to do benefits. If there is any sense that these individuals are going to do collective bargaining or trying to unionize, they are complicit. And until we recognize that we are going after the most vulnerable, the ones that don't have a voice, but that help put food on our table, then we can't have an honest conversation. And if there was a way that we can actually fine a lot of these corporations, we can then demand fair wages. The reason that they're able to hire undocumented immigrants is because they want to pay far below the market value without any consequences. And all they care about is the bottom line. So we have to make sure that we are pushing back, and this is an opportunity for both the Republicans to come to the table and the Democrats to come to the table. But let's be clear, Ari, what the president is doing is that he's trying to say that he had nothing to do with this rhetoric, but it's his policies that are going strictly after the Latino community, regardless if they are citizens or not. He tries to do the dog whistles, like I'm going after undocumented immigrants, but yet we find individuals who are U.S. citizens caught up in a system in ICE detention for weeks until they're able to get publicity. When you talk about why is there a citizenship question, it's to disenfranchise American Latinos. When you talk about wanting to create a denaturalization task force, every single person right now who's of Latino descent or even has a shade of brown is at risk, and we need the American public to be as outraged as we are. The fact that there's an 11-year-old girl crying, asking the government to please show some heart, that should take to the sphere of what we're talking about in this moment, that we have to make sure not only are we protecting these children, but what does it speak of us individually that we are not marching on the streets?
Look, I have to say that, what is so incredibly heartbreaking is why are these brown children less important than America's white children? Why is it okay for us to watch this little girl cry on national television and beg the government to have heart, and we do nothing about it? I mean, these are children who have been abandoned, not because their parents don't want them or because they can't provide for them, but because the government is purposefully ripping them away. And then you have children that we are forcing into unsanitary and unsafe conditions. Why aren't we marching? Why aren't we outraged? The idea that this administration wants to say flippantly that they had no idea, or it's just a coincidence that after 2 mass shootings within 13 hours of each other, that then the president today, this administration, decides to have one of the biggest sweeps in history, and we're supposed to believe that it wasn't a 1-2 punch, that he wasn't trying to send a message to the Latino community? Give me a break. How stupid does he think that we are not to be able to connect the dots of what this administration is trying to do?
And we picked our words carefully on that, Eleanor, in what I reported, and folks can draw reasonable inferences. We're not, as a news organization, yet able to report the inner workings of a few hours ago of the White House yet. So we're not reporting officially that it's a 1-2 punch. But viewers of The Beat will know, because we've reported a lot on how many other times, even when the president pledged and threatened mass raids, they didn't happen in the hundreds or thousands as he threatened. We've had folks on. I had the acting border commissioner, Mr. Morgan, on and pressed him on how that didn't happen. So what I think is the evidence supporting Danielle's point, and I'm stressing it because I want viewers to understand it, is there's a lot of evidence that it takes a lot to get a mass raid going, that they at other times have not even pulled them off. And here we are tonight, as Danielle was saying, and all of a sudden here there is one. As for the government's responsibility, Eleanor, I'd like you to speak to this, especially when we think about what used to be bipartisan things. Reagan, Bush, Obama, and Clinton all talked about the notion that children seeking asylum, children crossing the border, were a special subset category. That actually was bipartisan, even amidst other debates. That has changed now. And then look at this. I'm going to read, again, this is just text, but the implications are quite dark. The government has an obligation legally and obviously ethically with children. That's why there's Child Protective Services. Usually, Child Protective Services come in when an external event or mistake or crime by an adult separates them from the child. Here we're dealing with actions by the government itself. Reading here from Mississippi's Clarion Ledger, the headline, "We've been up all night. Child Protection Services can't locate children." Quote, "As of Thursday morning, the state agency didn't know how many children were impacted by these raids. We've been up all night trying to figure this out," says their official government spokesperson, Eleanor. How backwards is that?
Yeah, they didn't get a heads up, which they're supposed to get. And the president would probably find most of the state officials in Mississippi would be more or less on his side, although I saw the school superintendent talking, and he certainly seemed, this was not the job he signed up for, to worry about children who'd been abandoned because of an ICE raid. And it's been reported that the president was irritated that the last 2 times that he telegraphed there would be widespread raids, that they didn't happen, or that they only made a small number of arrests. So there's an element here of, pleasing the big guy in the Oval Office. But, now that Mitch McConnell is talking about coming back to Washington in September and maybe passing some legislation, there's an easy fix for what we saw in Mississippi. These are people who need jobs, who do good work. We have a guest worker program. Why can't they come here legally? I mean, I don't get why we have to make it complicated. Those employers need those workers. They're not going to find them anywhere else. Why doesn't someone put together just that small portion and increase the guest worker program? It already exists. So, it's the cruelty behind all of these measures, I think, that is really disturbing. And it's not about the rule of law at all. It's about targeting people and making them uncomfortable in a country that has always made immigrants feel welcome.
Eleanor Clift, Maria Teresa Kumar, and Danielle Moody Mills, thanks to each of you. An important discussion.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.